Batman Begins is not next in our Nolan film list because I got the order wrong. This was meant to come after Insomnia, but I did The Prestige instead because I didn't read the IMDb list properly. But anyway, Batman Begins. This is the 5th Nolan film. No, it's not. It's the 4th. I'm confusing myself now. This is the 4th Nolan film. As the title gives away, this is a Batman film and it's his beginning, his introduction, his origin. This is something new for Nolan compared to his prior films. Obviously everything before he done was, you know, an original story from him. This, of course, is one of the biggest comic book superheroes out there. Easily the biggest in DC. So obviously this is all about adaptation more than anything. And with this adaptation you get a very grounded take on Batman. I haven't really seen any of the earlier movies, but I've heard they're pretty goofy. And the scores kind of say the same. I have seen the original show from the 60s, I think it was, with Adam West. You know, it's a good show, but it's a whole different vibe compared to what we're getting here. After Batman Returns, from what I hear, I guess the only way was up, really. So yeah, Nolan drops the goofiness and he goes for a realistic take on Batman, something that could potentially be real. It's nothing like your later DCEU stuff, you know, your more recent films. Obviously there's a lot of focus of like more extraterrestrial stuff in there. You've got Superman thrown in, you've got all these other elements. Oh, why do you have to fucking do that? Christian Bale does a good job here. He covers both sides of Bruce Wayne and Batman really well, but it's not necessarily as charismatic as I like. I kind of prefer what we've seen recently from Ben Affleck. I feel like he kind of brings a bit more personality to it. But it's by no means a bad performance or anything like that. He does exceptionally well here, especially, you know, doing an American accent the whole time. And he has to do the weird Batman voice. I kind of dig it though. I'm not too bothered about it. As I said, with this Nolan Batman movie being quite grounded and more realistic, I understand that this version of Bruce Wayne's quite a secluded one. You know, we're keeping it real with these characters. I guess charisma is not necessarily a big trait for Batman anyway. That's more of a Spidey thing. This is a man to spark fear into Gotham's criminals, so he doesn't necessarily have to do it in style. It's just about doing it. And one thing I really like about this movie is it doesn't rush the whole origin bit. It takes its time to set up this character of Batman. But within the first act of the film, you've got a lot of stuff showing flashbacks, obviously the typical stuff involving his parents dying when he was young, and that's sort of weaved in between these scenes of him as he's training with Ra's al Ghul. This is origin we all know, we've seen it before, but it was just nice to actually see them take their time with this. Now the plot for this film is not too daring, it keeps it sort of simple, but I think that's for the best. With an origin story you don't want anything too complicated to start with. The fact it takes its time is also great because it allows them to introduce a whole bunch of characters, both on the good side and the bad side. You've got Alfred, Lucius, Rachel, Gordon, and then on the opposing side you've got Ra's al Ghul, you've got the Scarecrow, you've got the crime bosses. It's great, it's really well paced and well done because when you introduce this many characters it can be overwhelming, especially for a first movie, but it's just paced very well. They're shown as elements to Bruce's life, so you really get to see who the people in his life are and how his world works. And I think the characters on the good moral side are definitely the best parts of this movie. Bruce Wayne, Rachel, Alfred, Lucius, they're all just brilliant in this film. And you know, the casting was absolutely spot on. I mean, Michael Caine for Alfred was just, you know, who else was going to do it? It's one of them, now that he's played Alfred, I can't really see a whole lot of people doing it as well as he did. Morgan Freeman, Lucius, no brainer. He's just got the voice for it. I mean, if you were Batman and you could pick any voice to have speaking to you, to give you advice, it'd be Morgan Freeman. Katie Holmes as Rachel does a really good job as well. You know, their relationship between Bruce and Rachel is interesting because obviously they're grown up as kids, all this sort of thing. I don't actually know if she's an original comic book character or if she was made for this movie. But, you know, she's a good addition to the film and you kind of need that love interest, especially in comic book movies. Something to really be a key emotional factor for the hero. And Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon is just an incredible casting choice. That was just, it was spot on. Once again, his American accent is very good. Now, the good guys are great. The bad guys, not so much. It's not down to the acting, it's more just down to the whole plot for them. Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow is pretty creepy. I like his outfit for this. It's literally just a suit but then a creepy ass Scarecrow hat on. But I like it. It works. It's effective enough. And Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul. It's a sort of character that has to deliver these lines that are quite almost like prophecies, all this sort of thing, and Liam Neeson's got the voice for it. You know, we saw it as Qui-Gon, so he can do it here as well. But despite their good performances, it was more just their characters that were kind of weak. You know, the plot villain for this film was just a large-scale attack on Gotham involving turning the water supply into gas. I don't know, it just wasn't all that interesting to me. I feel like a generalised big city attack never actually feels as grand scheme and big threat as it might do on paper. It's more stuff that's personal to the hero that I think is much more effective. And when it came to these villains, Ra's al Ghul and Scarecrow trying to, you know, do this whole thing with the water supply, I just wasn't all that interested, and personally I didn't feel like I had any stakes invested in it. You know, I didn't feel this big, oh my god, I hope nothing happens, I hope they don't succeed. It just wasn't very impactful. But you know, it's not a major issue, this is an origin story, so you don't really want all your eggs thrown in the villain basket to start with, because then you've really got nothing as impactful left for future movies, you know, any sequels that are made. So it's a bit cliche, but I'm not really mad at it. It wasn't bad or anything, it just wasn't all that interesting. But I do want to say, Gotham City is extremely fleshed out, and they make this world feel real. Obviously it's filmed based in New York, but Gotham City really felt like its own thing. It felt grimy, dirty, it felt like it does in, say, the Arkham game. There's a lot of depth to this city, and it really makes it feel like the storylines are like an endless possibility, because it feels like there's so much density to the whole thing. Batman Begins is a well-written movie, a well-directed movie. It looks really good as well. The cinematography is excellent. I did find the editing a little bit choppy. I've mentioned this before with Insomnia. Action scenes, they were just a bit rapid. But I'll tell you, the use of practical effects in this movie are unreal. And seeing the tumbler for the first time, it's incredible that that's actually a vehicle. It's so cool that they use that as the Batmobile. Like I said, they're trying to make this world extremely real, a really realistic take on Batman. So using a vehicle like that actually exists and making it the Batmobile. And same with this suit as well. It's made out of like ballistic armor, stuff that's supposedly militarized. And that was a nice touch. I think it really allows you to just sink into this movie and just feel involved in it. There is a tiny bit of goofiness. It's just from some of the one-liners. They're a bit cliche, they're a bit in your face almost, but it's a comic book movie. I think you're always going to get a little bit of that. It's, you know, that little bit of sort of comic book cringe from the one-liners, but you know, you can let it slide. So yeah, the first movie in Nolan's Batman trilogy is a cracking one, to be fair. It's a strong setup. The villains were kind of lacking. There's some bit of dodgy dialogue in there, but apart from that, it's about as good as you can really hope for an origin story for The Dark Knight. And of course, with that tease at the end for the Joker, you're going to be nothing but excited for the next film. I never actually saw these films in the cinema when they were coming out. I mean, it was quite early. I would have been like 6-7 years old when Batman Begins came out. But I imagine the hype after seeing that Joker tease was probably off the scale, and people couldn't wait for the next one. And rightly so, because the sequel is, well, we'll talk about in the next one. Overall, I'm going to give this movie an 8.5 out of 10. Up next is The Dark Knight. I did actually check the list. This is next. I checked the IMDb list. I will not get it out of order again. So yeah, I'll see you then.